Are you paying too much in taxes? Elevated Tax and Accounting is a firm that specializes in tax planning and strategy to minimize your tax bill. Elevated Tax consult with you on tax strategy throughout the year, so no more waiting until the end of the year and hoping for the best. As a business owner, you know your sole focus should be spent working on your business, not in it. Outsourcing gives you the time to concentrate on the core reasons you started your company, to create and innovate a top-tier product and generate profits. Elevated Tax and Accounting, elevating you and your business with a modern professional touch. If you're on your way to or from a Grizz game, there's literally no better place to go than the Press Box Sports Bar and Grill. It is the Grizz fan headquarters in the heart of Grizz country. They have a happy hour every single day between 4 and 6 p.m. with $3 drafts. They also have a full bar with great beer and wine selection, excellent food. Press Box Burger, the Smash Burger, delicious. They also have the best chili in the state of Montana. It's definitely the best place to pregame before Grizz games. Swing into the heart of Grizz country at the Grizz fan headquarters, the Press Box Sports Bar and Grill, right next to the University of Montana campus. YouTube channel. Matt Brown, the founder and curator of the Extra Points newsletter, joining us here on Nuanez now. Happy anniversary, man. 5 years. You did it. You made it 5 years with Extra Points. So good job on that. That's the number one thing that I wanted to congratulate you on. And the thing that sort of got me to invite you on for sort of your quarterly update. So good job, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's not easy to make a living in digital media, and now my baby looks like it's old enough to go to kindergarten now, which is pretty exciting. I'm hoping that there'll be more anniversaries to celebrate to come for Extra Points.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, tell us maybe about the most challenging parts of getting to this point, but also some of just the rewarding parts of getting it to this point.
Sure. So for those that aren't familiar, Extra Points is a publication that covers business, policy, and off-the-field stories in the college athletics industry. So it means I do a lot of stuff about writing about NIL, about federal and state laws impacting college athletics, about money, television, conference realignment, all of that kind of stuff. And freeing up space for the other beat writers to cover who's going to actually win the game. Which is wonderful and rewarding. It can be a challenge that I write 4 times a week, and I'm the only content guy we have with the company. We have other staffers now, but a lot of them handle sales, they handle technical product, they handle other things. If you're doing this kind of work across the country, I'm not just writing about the Power Four or even just Division One. It's really roughly 1,000 schools we have in the NCAA, which can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but rewarding because it sends me to places like Montana. It's let me develop relationships with EA Sports and the licensing and the video game world, and building connections with so many different people that make up kind of the college sports industrial complex. I'm never bored.
And never bored for sure. If you haven't checked this newsletter out, you should. It's very, very informative, especially for people that are wondering about sort of the ins and outs of college sports, the evolution of college sports, and perhaps even the future of college sports. So let's start there. There's been a ton of news lately. New Haven going Division One. I don't even know if we need to know about them specifically as much as just sort of this phenomenon, right? Like, I think that when people think of conference realignment, they think of moving up, aligning with the powers that be. But it seems like there's a lot of schools, especially on the East Coast, that are perhaps making decisions to realign for other reasons. And we've seen this with a lot of teams defecting out of the CAA. I wonder if people say New Haven, what the heck is that? Well, I think that maybe the future specifically of the FCS and maybe small school Division I athletics is in some of these maybe smaller conferences like the Northeastern Conference, the Patriot League, leagues like that. So put this New Haven in perspective, maybe from a broader perspective on some of the trends we're seeing with teams maybe, I don't want to say moving down, but moving out and moving to different sort of conglomerations of fellow peers.
You really hit the nail on the head when you mentioned this being so important within the Northeast. This is the part of the country I think that's really ground zero for schools potentially reclassifying out of Division I, like we recently saw with St. Francis in Pennsylvania, with schools potentially reclassifying into Division I, most recently with New Haven, but Lemoyne and Mercyhurst and Stonehill and other schools in that region. A major part of that is because the demographics of this country have been changing over the last 10 years, and more people are moving away from the Northeast. They're moving out of the Midwest, and they're going to places like Montana, But more specifically, they're going south and they're going southwest. So if you don't have as many people in Connecticut, in New Hampshire, and Massachusetts as you might have had in 25 years ago, a school like New Haven is competing with more schools for fewer students. Sometimes those schools might decide one way that we can improve our marketing and improve our reach and our relevancy to the smaller pool of students is through Division I athletics. And some schools might decide Division I athletics is becoming so expensive that we can no longer justify it. And so it's interesting. New Haven's been trying to get into Division I can tell you, since I've been running Extra Points. It's been a 5-year plus deal that's gone beyond multiple ADs, multiple university presidents. Now they and their blue turf have finally gotten in. But this is also where I know many other schools are having the same conversation that St. Francis did about can we exist at this level financially, structurally? Is our school going to stay open for the next 25 years? So it wouldn't shock me if in 5 or 6 years, the membership of not just the NEC, but the America East and the MAC and maybe some of these other schools looks significantly different, both up and down.
And then you have to wonder if that same dynamic might exist out west, just because all the powers that be in the West have either moved into the Big Ten. The Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore. What's the future of the Mountain West? What's the future of the Pac-12? Do they find another way to have the Pac? I mean, I know that's sort of on the horizon, but what does it look like? There's really only about 36 Division I playing football schools out west, and those are either the current or former Pac-12 members, the Mountain West members, and the Big Sky members. But yeah, I just always wonder what's going to happen to the teams out west that have played Division I football for a long time, that have done it for a whole lot of reasons that aren't money, right? And is there decisions to be had for? And I'm not trying to speculate about these specific schools, but I've thought a lot about it with Portland State, Eastern Washington, maybe even Idaho State. Like, what is the football future and just the athletic future of those schools? I don't know, but you wonder if there's maybe a similar deal where they say, hey, let's just conglomerate and have more of a Division II model and save ourselves some money.
So one of the pressures you're talking about there are real. There's one really big difference between the West and the East Coast for these pressures. And it sounds silly, but it's worth kind of pointing out. There's just a whole hell of a lot of empty space out west.
No question.
The thing about a New Haven or a St. Francis is that you could reclassify or change leagues 1, 2, or 3, and there's going to be 30 schools within a bus ride. You know, New Haven, you could kick a football and land on Yale. And I want to say, I think they even share some of their athletic facilities right now. They're so close together. And you don't have that depth of Division II and Division III institutions in most states out west, where you could reclassify and you're still going to have to put people on airplanes. That's been a major challenge at the Division II space, as California schools have mostly retreated from playing college football. So I think you do have some schools where leaving Division I doesn't really save you any money, because you're just going to have to fly to Colorado instead of Washington State, rather than having drivable distances for some of these smaller schools. But your point about we're already financially challenged, and at some point, new facility construction finally becomes prohibitively expensive. Having to pay athletes specifically becomes too expensive, and then figuring out where you want to be in this world. That's a school specific question, but it's a very difficult one, and it's one that even makes sense here, even in this market, where you might decide I want to play football at the highest level, but if I don't have a budget at the highest level, it doesn't make sense for me to continue to try to do what maybe Nevada and New Mexico are doing, just given our particular financial constraints.
Is a will you marry me in your future? Or maybe you do it all over again. Hi, I'm Brian Toon with Jewelry Design Center, inviting you to come see the largest selection of Will You Marry Me in the state of Montana. The brightest diamonds of every shape and size, unique settings built to last, and skilled jewelers on site offering free sizing and maintenance for life, because that's how long we want to be your jeweler. Jewelry Design Center in Missoula, on Brooks, across from the Montana.
You're driving along on the highway and you've been hit by a semi-truck. Now what do? You call your Montana attorneys, Ryan and Miller. We have the expertise to help guide you along in these specific types of accidents. So these are the 3 steps that you need to follow. Number 1, make sure that the police are called and that there is a report of the accident. Second, make sure that you're getting the medical attention that you need and following up with your doctor. Third, do not talk to an insurance company until you've talked to an attorney. They are not going to help you protect your rights, and you want to make sure that you know all that you're entitled to. Contact an attorney today by clicking the link below.
Matt Brown, Extra Points newsletter, joining us here on Nuanez Now, ESPN Radio. One of your most recent newsletters, the headline was "Why Kentucky Athletics Just Moved to an LLC. Is this the wave of the future?" And more about Kentucky-specific state laws. Tell us about this. Tell us about some of the details behind this, because I find this really interesting.
Yeah, the way it's set up right now almost everywhere in the country is your athletic department is owned and operated by the university itself. It's set up as a nonprofit, so you don't have to pay some of the same income taxes or things that we might for our own individual businesses, and it's part of the university. And universities may sometimes buy assets or do other things beyond athletics that might have a profit component or might not fit as neatly within the current university structure. And like a really common example, I don't know if this is the case so much in Montana, but in other parts of the country, universities will buy or merge with other healthcare systems. Perhaps you can provide, like a university healthcare 3 or 4 hours away from campus. You might merge with local community hospitals or something, or have outreach that way. And what Kentucky has done is they wanted to expand some of their university hospital services to rural Kentucky and places outside of Lexington. And they set up a separate LLC to house some of those assets, to provide some additional legal protection, liability protection for the university, and to maybe do things a little bit faster than it would if you were an organ or an agent of the state. I couldn't tell you whether that's necessarily the case in Montana or Idaho or Oregon. A lot of that really is dependent on state law. But as athletic departments across the country are realizing that they need to grow more revenue, and that revenue might require doing things beyond just raising tickets or selling beer. It might mean entering into new real estate development projects, which might require private investors. It might require new licensing deals. Some people have speculated potentially selling equity stakes to private investors. That's not what Kentucky's trying to do here, but that's something that could feasibly happen in the future. Then you might look at this particular model. Selfishly, I hope more schools don't do that, because in many states that will mean that I can't file open records requests anymore, and the public would have less accountability. But as this world becomes more financially sophisticated, that may be something other schools look into doing.
Fascinating, because I was going to reference the Forbes article recently about perhaps private equity firms, their next frontier being exactly that. I mean, the headline was "Private Equity's Next Big Shopping Spree, College Football." And what do you think of just that element, especially because a lot of this would be connected to state institutions, and so much of what you do and so much of the point of what we both do is sort of checks and balances of public information and things that people that are taxpayers in states deserve to know. If it is private equity, is that limited? And what do you think of just maybe that frontier if that was to come about?
It very much could be limited, and this is something else to think about. As I've understood this, from learning more about private equity and talking to offices that are in that space and some other businesses, the typical PE model is to move in somewhere, buy some controlling interest so you can have a say in the decision making, and then exit that investment relatively quickly. Generally within 5 to 10 years. And if it's PE buying a stake of a private business, we would say that investment can be highly liquid. If you want to offload a 25% share of a company, there's lots of different entities that might want to buy it, and so you could turn things around fairly quickly. I think one of the challenges in college sports in going down this model is that athletic directors and university presidents are increasingly not going to be there long term. They change to other jobs,
right?
But everything else, the people like you and I, the fans, and the people the taxpayers that own equity in those facilities and everything, they're going to stay there a long time. If private equity comes in and ends up staying more than 5 or 10 years, the people that signed the deal might not be the people that have to clean up the mess that comes afterwards. And if the PE turns things around very quickly, generally you do that by firing people, or you do that by cutting costs, which might lead to things that the public doesn't want. If the private equity firm comes in and says, it turns out that that Bobcat volleyball is some kind of market inefficiency, and we have to get rid of that. I don't think once you really get under the hood that the maths most of the time. And that's why there's been a lot of chatter about PE for really the last 3 years, and no one's done a deal yet. That might be a different calculus at the conference level. Might be a different calculus with the private investor that wants to take a longer term view of the investment. I don't want to say it doesn't work ever, but I would have a lot of concerns, not just about public access to data, but about incentives. Montana and Montana State want to be here for another 100 years. Redbird Capital might not theoretically see things the same way.
Man, you're giving me flashbacks to my newspaper days.
This is the other thing here too, right? If anybody should be particularly have their antennas perk up over the concerns of this model, it's anybody that's worked in a newspaper, because few industries have been more obliterated by these guys than regional newspapers.
Yep, no doubt. I mean, long story short, I remember when I was the sports editor at the Bozeman Chronicle, and they came in and said, "Hey, we got to cut the coverage of 29 of these high schools." And I'm just like, this can't be good business, because, I mean, we're selling papers in White Silver Springs, Montana and Ennis, Montana, because they want the high school sports. We're not covering the city councils in these towns. They want the box scores. And, you know, all for naught, moot point, and that all went away. And you're right. I mean, that's sad, but that's that's perhaps the most doomsday of this potential scenario, right?
Yeah. And I think there are people that work in chain retail stores that would have similar stories. I don't want to say it's always bad. If an entity needs to raise capital quickly and has a good strategy, and you're not loading yourself up with debt doing these deals, it can work. And I can intellectually wrap my head around several real estate developments where maybe the university doesn't have that expertise and somebody else does, or some of these firms that do a lot of work in professional sports. I could see where it might work. But I would be very, very reticent, very concerned. And the experience that you just talked about is unquestionably one of the reasons why for me.
Matt Brown.
Being in this industry since I was in college, one of the things I think we take the most pride in is Aspen Sound's been such a presence in Missoula for almost 40 years. The cool parts about our job is people always ask me, what do you do for a living? I sell fun, whether it's as simple as window tint all the way up to integrating a backup camera into a factory screen. I'm usually pretty excited about the options we can present to
Matt Brown, Extra Points Newsletter, joining us here on Nuanez Now, ESPN Radio. The other interesting subject I wanted to talk to you about is sort of the rise in prevalence of general managers for football and men's basketball teams, and we've seen some high-profile basketball characters get these GM jobs, so to speak. The Big Sky Conference angle here is Shaq is coming to the Big Sky Conference as the general manager.
Excuse me,
State.
Dr. Shaq, I believe is what he prefers to be called now. Yeah,
Dr. Shaq, the big Aristotle, coming to Sacramento State. Unbelievable. But what do you I mean, it seems to me that all these jobs are not going to have the same sort of workload. It seems to me like the GM at an Atlantic 10 school or whatever is not going to have the same deal as Shaq. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Shaq will be completely hands-on, and this will be his new passion. In your mind, like, what's the dream operation of a general manager? Like, what would a school get out of a dream GM for investing in that element of college sports and the sort of the new frontier here?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I don't think anybody could say we've exactly figured out the footprint, because it's a new gig. You know, I don't mind sharing. Like, I was just on the phone yesterday with Chandler, who's the GM at Montana State for Montana State football, and that's going to be for a story that probably runs in a week or so. If Chandler played in the NBA, I think I missed that on his LinkedIn profile. A pretty common profile of a GM at the FCS football level or at mid-major college basketball tends to be somebody that worked in operations, that worked in player personnel, that worked in some kind of scouting. And they're generally college football guys. And at the FCS level, they're generally pretty young. You're not bringing in a whole lot of people who are in their 50s or have 25 years experience. I don't want to say it's not a GA job, but the kinds of people that were GAs 3 years ago are more of that profile. And I will say that these are the kind of people that also know who to talk to in compliance about getting a JUCO guy eligible, or where on campus you got to go to figure out someone's class schedule, and what it takes, and what kind of person from out of state is going to be comfortable and can be successful in this kind of environment. There are other folks that have come from an explicitly professionalized model. A lot of you see this more in college football, but there's some people like Florida State, I think, is an example of this on the college basketball side, where it's you want somebody who ran salary cap metrics for like the Kings, or somebody that's done nothing but crunch tape and crunch numbers, because you want to figure out how can I most efficiently spend this $400,000 on a shooting guard. And that model might work. I think there's a lot of operational differences between the pros and college that might make that harder, but it could work, right? If you know ball, you know ball. I think that's less of an issue in Big Sky country. I don't say this to be disrespectful, but like I've seen your all's budgets. If there anybody is here that's going to spend $20 million in house money, they've done a really good job keeping it secret. So that's not all of the job that a GM does. You want somebody who can potentially help raise money and facilitate deals that are outside the house salary cap. You want somebody who can understand film and player projection and player analysis and what kind of people are going to fit well within your scheme, and somebody who can help negotiate contracts and manage the finite resources that you have. When I look at Shaq, when I look at Steph Curry at Davidson, when I look at some of the other NBA guys that are signing up to be assistant GMs, that's not a full-time job. I don't think Shaq is going to be in his basement grinding tape of some guys playing in the high school outside of Stockton, California, to see who might end up to be a Sacramento State Hornet. Shaq, God bless this guy, has shown he's willing to put his name on all kinds of stuff if the check cashes. That's a publicity move. That's a fundraising move. That's something you say on the recruiting trail. And that might be fine. Like that's not me criticizing, but what a GM means for Sacramento State basketball with the Big Aristotle, and what the Grizz and the Bobcats and the Lumberjacks and other people in this league are doing are not the same thing, even if the job title on LinkedIn is the same thing.
And then it poses the question of, I understand what Sac State's doing. They're trying to make themselves as appealing as possible for an invite to a different league than what is the Big Sky. Or if that doesn't work out, they're trying to make themselves as competitive as possible in the Big Sky. They're using sort of that clout of leading the news cycle to spread the brand. And you bring in Mike Bibby, you almost bring in Michael Vick, you bring in Brandon Murray, and you have all these deals. You've seen it impact recruiting, at least in this brief time, positively. Always remains to be seen if those guys pan out or not, but they're getting high-profile recruits in both football and basketball. So the best case scenario for Sac State is that they get their invite. They go FBS independent, and or they get invited into the Mountain West or whatever it might be. Or if that doesn't work out, they're highly competitive in football and men's basketball in the Big Sky Conference. What do you think is the worst case scenario? Is there a way that too much publicity and too much sort of fanfare here could backfire for Sac State?
Sure, especially because, let's be honest, Sacramento State basketball has sucked for longer than you and I have been alive.
Yeah,
right. And bringing in a couple of high-profile transfers that haven't really produced that much on the court and a bunch of publicity. When you win 7 games, being coached by a guy who's never coached college basketball, and if I'm understanding correctly, left his high-profile high school gig over off-the-field allegations. You're running a really big risk. And in many ways, I think this actually reminds me of kind of Tarleton State playbook, when they were very, and still are, very transparent about, we want to be FBS. We want to be in Conference USA. We want to be on the Mountain West. We're going to have our president call everybody with a cell phone and tell them that. And we're going to maybe take some risks to get publicity to show that we're serious. We're going to go hire Gillespie after him not exactly having a great reputation within the industry. We're going to let people know we're thinking about hiring Art Briles, who's coached in Stevensville. We're going to be very transparent about this. And now, things have stabilized. They've been better on the field, on the court in a couple of years, but it's not an accident that they're not in any of those other leagues right now. And they're desperately trying to find a life raft out of the disintegrating whack. If you are going to invite the world to put a spotlight on your program, you have to deliver. I understand why Sacramento State's doing this. I've spent time around that campus. I know the area decently well, and I understand that you haven't historically activated your corporate base. There's a lot of sidewalk fans, a lot of people that have moved to Sacramento that don't care about the Hornets. And so you have to stand up on your head and demand attention for a little bit. And I get it, right? Like not everybody in this conference does that. But then you not only have to win, but you have to show these other university presidents that you can sustain it. And I don't think it's an accident that when the Mountain West needed an FCS team, they brought in Sac State's crosstown rival. I don't think it's an accident that the Pac-12 needs another school and is openly flirting with a bunch of schools 1,000 miles away, and they're not taking Sacramento State's phone calls. I think there's a reason that a bunch of very smart people in this industry are looking at what's going on and on that campus and saying, I'll pass.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Town Pump. Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Big Sky Breakdown, proudly presented by the Bobcat Collective at Montana State. The Bobcat Collective is the NIL collective that serves Montana State University student athletes. The collective has partnered with Montana State to connect fans, alumni, businesses, and local nonprofits with Montana State student athletes. Opportunities through the collective allow student athletes to earn compensation while serving the greater Montana State University community. Sign up now for memberships and enjoy automatic entry into raffles for free tickets while supporting the bright minds at Montana State. They have multiple different membership tiers, and you can also be a one-time supporter, and you can also business partner or corporate supporter. Visit bobcatcollective.com for more. Cash One Pawn has the most extensive inventory of any pawn shop in western Montana. Whether you're in the market for firearms, power tools, bows, video game consoles, or sunglasses, Cash One Pawn is the best deals around. And now Cash One Pawn gives you the ability to shop online from anywhere. Make CashOnePawn.com part of your shopping habits. Also make sure to download the Cash One Pawn app. Cash One Pawn, Missoula's premier pawn shop, located on Roller Coaster Road on the way to the Y. Matt Brown, Extra Points newsletter here on Nuanez Now, ESPN Radio. And that's where I think SAC is at the same time pushing the envelope in the way that they should, and also maybe are stuck, and they might just be a ship lost at sea. I don't know. We don't know how to determine the future, but Sam Herder and I were talking about this. People in this part of the world, Montana, the Dakotas, etc.
Yeah.
They would say, why would you possibly want to move up to the FBS as an independent? Why would you possibly want to go play in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl or the Meineke Car Care Bowl? Our argument was, though, that if you move up to the FBS as an independent or get into an FBS league either way, you're actually way more relevant in California instantly as Sacramento State than you are anywhere in the Big Sky or anywhere in the FCS. And like Sam so accurately pointed out, Sac State is so far away from catching North Dakota State. They could catch, an FBS whatever. They could win 6 games in the FBS, go 6-6, go 7-5 someday. Figure out a way to get into a bowl game. So I don't know. I feel like it would actually provide a more relevance to be a middle of the road to nothingness FBS team than to sit in the Big Sky Conference and just be middle of the road. And I mean, they made the playoffs a couple times or whatever, but how close are they to North Dakota State? They're not close.
No, and I don't think that they're that close to making an FCS playoff semifinals. It's not a bad program. And I know, as Sam has pointed out a couple of times, it's a program that has fans. People will watch Sacramento State football games, but you're right. Is this the top priority in this metropolitan area? No, that's the Kings. Is it the second priority? No, right now maybe it's the A's, maybe it's the Lakers, maybe it's a bunch of other things. It's an area that has a lot of transplants, and I think it's a difficult thing to figure out, because how a university defines relevance and what those kind of KPIs are varies a lot from school to school, as is your ceiling. For as kind of mediocre as a lot of Sac State athletics have been for a while, this is a large university in a large city that doesn't have many other large universities, where there's a lot, where you're at the center of power in an enormous state. And with some of the work that you're trying to do research wise and some of the work you're trying to do growth wise, yeah, a school with 20,000 students in a top 40 metropolitan area, that's typically more FBS than it is FCS. I could understand if someone says Sac State has more in common institutionally with San Jose State or Fresno State than it does your typical Southland or WAC conference institution. That does make sense. It's the hope that you can kind of buoy this into profitability, that you can buoy this into competing for conference championships above the Mountain West level. I struggle to see that. It's very difficult to move from elite FCS team to even above average FBS team. And the ones that do throw a ton of money at it, right? There's not that many James Madisons and Boise States and UCFs. But I understand why they think that might be the case. If you want somebody like me to have heard of you, you should join FBS. I live in Chicago. Right. Maybe Sacramento State doesn't need a guy like me to have heard of them. I don't know.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out. Matt Brown, Extra Points newsletter here on Nuanez Now. Last thing for you then, any big picture college sports stories that you got your eyes on in the upcoming just next couple months? Where are we at with the House settlement, and what else do you sort of have on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, the House settlement's huge. We're recording this here on the 7th. Lord willing, late this evening, we'll know what the NCAA and power conferences have filed about satisfying Judge Wilkins' concerns about roster limits and grandfathering in walk-ons, whether that will be enough to get this thing actually approved. It's possible the whole thing is approved and finalized by early next week. It's possible the whole thing blows up, and that would be a catastrophic change or impact for big time college sports. Because if this thing goes to trial and the NCAA loses, we're looking at a $12 billion payment. It'll bankrupt Indianapolis. It will wash out half the Big Sky anyway. So that's the single biggest thing. You have some big industry conferences coming over the summer. There's going to be a few more realignment conversations happening over the summer. But for me, beyond that stuff, beyond video games, I want to continue to better understand how institutions from Ohio State to Montana are planning on allocating, spending, and tracking their house money. And that's a story I think that I will be writing about regularly for the next 12 months if this thing is finally approved.
Well, it's certainly going to give us a ton to talk about. It's certainly going to give me a ton to read about. You should go read about it too. Extra Points newsletter is available by visiting extrapointsmb.com. It just lands right in your email inbox. I read it every single morning that it comes through. So it's really, really interesting. And if you want to be on the inside track of college sports across the country, this guy does great work. Matt, we appreciate the time, man. Thanks for always jumping on with us, and we'll talk to you soon. But happy 5th anniversary again. And anything else you want to add about Extra Points before we get you out of here?
No, listen, I appreciate it. This is the tool that I know is read in the Big Sky Conference office and in athletic departments across this footprint. But I promise you, not everything is bland or boring or esoteric. That if you're just a fan, I want to understand how this sausage is made, I think that you'll find a lot of value from it. Appreciate you having me on.